The truth didn't come out in a grand, dramatic confrontation or even a tearful, desperate argument. It came out in the mundane, heartbreaking tragedy of a forgotten device and a moment of devastating carelessness. Rex, 17, and living a life carved out of cautious secrecy, had spent months saving every dollar from his meager allowance and birthday checks to acquire a refurbished laptop. It wasn't powerful. The screen often flickered with a faint, uneasy green light, and the battery life was questionable, but it was his. It was a small, glowing, often overheating portal to a world where he could be anonymous and, crucially, safe from the suffocating judgment of his home. On it, he had meticulously created a private folder, camouflaged and hidden deep within a secondary drive partition filled with short stories. These weren't tales of high fantasy or starship battles. They were quiet, tender narratives about boys holding hands under the stars, sharing secrets in whispered tones, and imagining a future without the crushing, constant weight of shame that defined his present life. One blustery Saturday afternoon in late October, Rex was rushing out, claiming a mandatory study group that didn't actually exist. His mind was frantic, consumed by the simple, exhilarating reality of the boy he had just started texting, a boy who made him feel seen, if only through a scream. In his adrenaline-fueled haste, he made the fatal mistake of leaving the laptop open on his bed, the File Explorer window minimized but not completely closed. His mother, entering his room minutes later to gather the week's laundry, saw the flickering screensaver but moved the mouse. The consequence wasn't the folder itself, but the fact that he hadn't fully minimized the File Explorer. There it was, a bright, glaring, and utterly conspicuous icon labeled Rex's Fiction. She didn't glance at the school reports or the fantasy drafts. She clicked directly into the document titled Just a Boy. The content was explicitly about a fictional first kiss, tentative, truthful, and unapologetically male. The world stopped. The discovery was silent, devastating, and immediate, like a bomb dropped without a sound. There were no immediate shouts, no flung accusations, just a cold, terrifying withdrawal from her touch, her voice, and her presence. The air in the house turned brittle. Rex returned that evening to find his mother's face utterly blank, a mask of clinical horror, as if she were staring at an infection. The laptop lid was closed, and on the kitchen table sat a pamphlet printed on glossy paper titled Reclaiming Purity and Purpose, A Path to Restoration. Within days, the polite, relentless, and clinical discussions began about sending him away to be fixed. The conversion therapy was the family's brutal, desperate attempt to erase what they had seen on that screen, to scrub away his truth. Rex's subsequent return, still himself, still gay, sealed his fate. He had failed their experiment, and for that unforgivable failure, he became homeless.
The last words Rex heard echoing from the locked front door were not a shout of anger, but a soundless, bone-chilling finality. It was the heavy, definite sound of a bolt sliding home, severing the last fragile tether to his childhood. The click was louder than any screaming match. At 17, Rex stood on the cold, weed-cracked pavement of a forgotten rural road, outside a house and a town that no longer considered him worthy of shelter. The facility had released him 2 days prior, labeling him resistant and uncooperative in their final report, a badge of failure they handed to his parents like a receipt. His parents, seeing him return to them unrepentant and stubbornly unchanged, had delivered their final, crushing verdict. Their rejection was absolute and delivered with frightening calm. He carried a small, threadbare backpack containing a single worn hoodie, an empty water bottle, and a stale granola bar. His heart felt pulverized into dust, a sensation far worse than mere pain. It was an echoing emptiness. It was late afternoon in late November, the kind of cold that seemed to seep directly into the marrow, ignoring the thin layers of his clothing. The air was bitter, carrying the metallic scent of coming snow, and the shadows of the utility poles stretched long and skeletal across the empty fields, seeming to mock his isolation and fragility. Rex knew only one thing. He had to walk. Anywhere. Away from the shame, the constant debilitating fear, and the recent memory of antiseptic rooms and the relentless whispered prayers meant to cure him of himself. The emotional numbness was the only thing keeping him vertical, acting as a thick, painful shield, insulating him from the full horror of his complete abandonment. He walked for hours, barely registering the sharp, grinding pain in his feet or the hunger pangs that gnawed at his stomach. He focused only on the dull, mechanical rhythm of his steps, left, right, forcing his mind into a safe state of blankness. The sun had dipped entirely below the horizon, pulling the temperature down sharply. He walked until his legs finally gave out, collapsing near a stretch of desolate highway, half hidden by a sparse clump of dry sagebrush. He was too exhausted to cry, and too numb to be afraid of the encroaching dark and the distant lonely sound of the high wind whistling through the fence wires. He just wanted the walking to stop, the relentless thinking to stop, and the heavy, terrifying emptiness in his gut to be replaced by something, anything, even just the oblivion of sleep.
Miles away, at the sprawling Double F Ranch, the kitchen was a swirling vortex of high-stakes, pre-holiday disaster, the air thick with smoke and panic. "Felix, I am so sorry. I swear I put the thermometer right where the recipe said," Fred yelled over the blare of the kitchen fan, which was valiantly failing to suck the toxic plume of scorched poultry out of the entire house. Fred, normally the calm center of the ranch's operations, a man whose movements were precise and measured, looked genuinely panicked, his face smudged with soot and despair. Felix, a man built like a comfortably worn leather armchair, with a kind, permanently creased smile, surveyed the scene. The centerpiece of their annual Thanksgiving feast, a magnificent 20-pound bird they had ordered weeks ago, was a total loss, a carbonized monument to culinary disaster, standing black and defiant in the center of the roasting pan. The failure meant the entire extended chosen family crew, the beloved annual gathering that meant so much to them, was in peril of being served charcoal. "It's all right, honey. It adds character, the character of a funeral pyre," he deadpanned, though his eyes were wide open with genuine alarm. Their diverse, loving crew, the neighbors, the college friends, the cousins, the ones who relied on the Double F for their holiday home, would arrive in less than 3 hours. "Okay, crisis mode. The big box store 20 miles over in Sterling is the only place open until 6. I'll make the run. I need to move fast and trust they have a bird that's not frozen solid. You just focus on rescuing the pies and try not to ignite the rest of the house, darling." Fred, still looking distraught, handed him the truck keys, his hand shaking slightly. "Please, just get back quickly. If you fail, I will have to serve the infamous 7-layer bean dip and face their wrath. Go!" Felix roared down the highway in his ancient, mud-splattered pickup, the truck protesting loudly with every gear shift. His mind was racing through the limited remaining grocery lists, traffic patterns, and the mental calculation of how long it would take to inject seasoning into a replacement bird.
He was so intensely focused on his mission of culinary salvage that when he had to swerve hard and shout a curse to avoid a large, unexpected deer that bolted across the asphalt, he barely registered the small, huddled figure until he was already 20 yards past. Felix slammed the brakes, the sudden stop throwing his emergency flashlight onto the floor. The tires spat gravel into the ditch. He backed up slowly, his deep-seated instinct of human compassion instantly overriding his culinary duty. He saw the kid, gaunt, shivering, and covered in road dust. Rex was curled in a defensive posture against the barbed wire fence, but it was the look in his eyes, a deep, cornered animal terror overlaid with utter physical exhaustion that instantly wiped all thought of poultry from his mind. "Hey, kid, you all right?" Felix rolled down the window, his voice low, steady, and calm. Rex flinched violently, shrinking back into the wires. Felix killed the engine, got out, and approached slowly, his hands held open and relaxed. "Hey, I'm Felix. Look, I'm not going to hurt you, but it's getting dark and it's freezing. You can't stay here." I pointed back toward the truck. "I have an urgent mission, a turkey emergency, believe it or not, but you can come with me, at least to get warm while I finish my errand." The mention of a turkey, so absurdly normal and domestic against the backdrop of Rex's catastrophe, was the only thing that cut through the sheer terror. I don't have anywhere to go," he finally managed, his voice barely a rasp of dried air, tasting metallic and cold. "Well, you're definitely not going to freeze to death on my road. Get in the truck, you ride with me to town, we secure the bird, and then we'll figure out where you're going after we've got some food in you. We're eating in a couple of hours, and we're short a guest. Deal?" Rex looked at the kind cowboy, at the dusty, warm truck, and then back at the empty, darkening road. He nodded, too cold and exhausted to protest, and climbed slowly into the passenger seat, the smell of worn leather and pine air freshener, a startling, comforting scent. He closed his eyes against the sudden, surprising warmth, feeling the rigid tension in his shoulders begin, faintly, to give way.
Felix returned to the ranch 45 minutes later, the fresh, properly sized turkey secured and sitting like a king in the back seat, and a frightened, silent Rex in tow. The warm, cluttered ranch house immediately engulfed Rex. The air was a confusing blend of wood smoke, rosemary, pie spices, and that sharp, lingering scent of burnt disaster, a bizarre, comforting mix of domestic chaos that felt impossibly welcoming. "We're back, and we got the prize and an extra passenger," Felix announced, setting the new bird carefully on the kitchen counter, instantly drawing Fred's attention. Fred, dusting flour off his apron, emerged from the pantry. His eyes, the color of worn denim, settled instantly and critically on Rex, assessing his weariness and fear with a surgeon's precision. Fred didn't offer a hug or a question, just a long, steady look that missed nothing. "I'm Fred. This place is the Double F. We're married. We don't judge. We're both too old and too tired for drama, and we certainly don't have patience for cruelty." His voice was low and resonant, a deep vibration that seemed to anchor the room. "Rex," the boy whispered, the sound scratchy in his throat. Fred nodded slowly. "Welcome to the Double F, Rex. You look like you need 3 things in this order: a hot shower, a thick meal, and about 10 hours of silence." He pulled out a clean thermal mug. "This is mint tea, the kitchen's best attempt at therapy. Drink it slow." He then walked over to the mantel and gestured to the framed photo of him and Felix laughing, a picture of sheer, unapologetic joy. "This is us. If you need a safe place to crash and figure out your next step for a few days, that's what we are. No strings, no sermons, no questions. This house is a sanctuary, not a prison. Now shower. Dinner's at 7 and we don't start late." Rex took the mug. His fingers trembled slightly, not just from cold but from shock. The sheer, overwhelming simplicity of the acceptance, the quiet defiance of their marriage, the easy, normalized use of the word husband in this remote place shattered the armor he'd built. He had just fled a place where love was conditional on his conformity, and here it was an unshakable public fact. He walked slowly toward the bunkhouse door, the single word found blooming in his exhausted mind. Found on a high-stakes holiday amidst a terrible, beautiful domestic failure. Rex emerged from the bunkhouse at 6:55 p.m., smelling faintly of clean soap and wearing Fred's spare, enormous flannel shirt, which smelled of laundry detergent and faint motor oil, comfortingly solid. The ranch house was no longer quiet. It was loud, vibrant, and packed with people. The chosen family crew had arrived in force, bringing noise, color, and more food than Rex had ever seen outside of a buffet line. They were a beautiful, diverse collection. Older women who looked like former university professors, a few tattooed younger couples who worked with horses, a geologist friend of Fred's, and several scruffy, quiet ranch hands who clearly adored Fred and Felix. The air was thick with laughter, the clatter of silverware, and the rich, complex, perfect aroma of the finely cooked Thanksgiving turkey. No one questioned Rex. They simply treated him as Felix's newest rescue, offering silent nods of greeting or a quick warm pat on the shoulder, and immediately handed him platters of food. "Gravy," a woman named Susan commanded, shoving a bowl at him. "It's mandatory, darling." Rex, wide-eyed and overwhelmed, sat quietly in a corner, holding a plate heaped with creamy mashed potatoes, savory sausage stuffing, and sweet cranberry sauce, dishes he was too stressed to remember tasting, yet somehow felt familiar and comforting. He observed Fred, composed now, expertly carving the replacement turkey with surgical precision, occasionally shooting Felix a look that was equal parts deep, abiding love and mock exasperation about the burned original. The long wooden table overflowed with warmth and dishes. He listened as the guests shared stories of travel, fierce political debates softened by wine, and ridiculous ranch mishaps, mostly involving Fred's historical inability to operate the toaster. This was the antithesis of the Thanksgiving he had known. His family's love was conditional, tied to his conformity and his silence. This family's love was a riotous, messy, unconditional fact. Rex watched the easy public affection between Felix and Fred, the way Felix would lean his head on Fred's shoulder during a particularly funny story, or the effortless way Fred knew to refill Felix's tea without a word. They were a successful, joyful, queer life, completely integrated into the world. It wasn't a hidden shame. It was a feast. Sometime between the second helping of stuffing and the first bite of the dense, spiced pumpkin pie, Rex lowered his dard completely. The noise and the human warmth were overwhelming, yet utterly safe. For the first time, he felt truly warm, the heat radiating not just from the parlor fire, but from the sheer force of collective, unapologetic love in the room. He realized the most powerful thing about this meal was not the turkey, but the simple, profound fact that he was allowed to be there, entirely as he was, on a day meant for belonging, without having to say a single word to earn his place.
The following weeks transformed Rex's life from a state of shock into a slow, steady immersion in a stable existence. There were no sermons, no demands, and most importantly, no probing questions about his past that he wasn't ready to answer. When he woke up screaming from the flashbacks of locked rooms and whispered religious accusations, Felix or Fred would simply leave a glass of warm water and a heavy, thick, weighted blanket outside his door, a quiet, powerful acknowledgement of his pain, without demanding a conversation or explanation. This subtle, respecting presence was the first real therapy Rex received. His true healing came not from talking, but from doing. Fred, the realist and the man of action, sensed Rex's urgent need for routine and physical grounding over emotional processing. He needed the world to feel predictable again. "Can't pay you yet, kid, but you can feed the horses. 2 scoops of feed morning and night, and you keep the stalls clean," Fred ordered, handing him a shovel and a pair of thick leather gloves. "It's repetitive, it smells, and it's honest work. If you do it right, the horses thank you with a quiet nudge. Good for the soul." Rex took to it immediately. The physical labor, mucking stalls, mending a fence line under Fred's silent, watchful eye, polishing tack until the leather gleamed, was a powerful salve. The rhythm of his body, the scent of hay and horse sweat, the gritty feel of the rope in his hands, it grounded him firmly in the present, away from the terrifying echoes of the past. He watched Felix and Fred operate the ranch, 2 men deeply in love, running a business, supporting each other with quick glances and easy touches. It was an impossible image of queer normalcy, the total antithesis of everything his old life had taught him, made real. One cold, late evening, Felix found Rex huddled by the roaring fire in the parlor, staring into the mesmerizing orange-blue flames. The silence was comfortable, shared. "Rough day?" Felix asked, sitting beside him, not too close, just close enough to offer warmth. I don't get how you 2 do it, how you built all this," Rex finally mumbled, breaking a long silence. He was referring to their life, their marriage, their stability. The 10 years of silence. How did you not break? Felix sighed, rubbing his hands together. "We didn't just wake up one morning," accepted Rex. "When I was your age, my parents tried to pray the gay out of me for 2 years before they finally just gave up and cut me loose. That was hard, but Fred's story was harder. His family didn't speak to him for a decade after he brought me home. 10 years of silence. But you know what they couldn't take? Our ranch, our stability, our ability to laugh. We had to build this place, this life, this whole network of friends from scratch, with our own 2 hands and a lot of stubbornness. We learned that the family you choose, the one that sees you and loves you for the fact that you're unbroken, is the one that's got your back. We survived because we had each other, and now we have you." This shared history, delivered without pity or drama, was the true foundation of Rex's recovery. He realized that the wound his parents inflicted wasn't a unique punishment, but a shared scar of survival. He wasn't alone in carrying it, and he wasn't broken. He was a survivor who was now ready to build. He felt a fierce, protective loyalty to these men and this land.
Over the quiet, restorative winter, Rex began to truly thrive. With Fred's technical help, he started taking his final high school courses online, finding a surprising aptitude for history and English literature. Fred, the practical mechanic, patiently helped him with the tedious trigonometry equations, drawing diagrams in the dirt floor of the workshop, while Felix, the philosophical rancher, quizzed him on historical events while they drove the pasture lines. Rex was getting his education back, one quiet, determined lesson at a time, regaining the future his parents had tried to steal. He found his ultimate emotional strength when he finally drafted the email to his parents. He sat with it for 3 days, revising, deleting, and polishing. It wasn't angry, not accusatory, just a simple, potent declaration of self-possession. I am safe. I am loved. I am not changing. Your rejection is your choice, but I choose happiness, and I choose my life. He hit send and immediately blocked their address, feeling the final heavy weight of their control lift from his chest like a physical shroud. The silence that followed was not abandonment, but pure, liberating peace. Spring brought a sense of real anticipation. Rex completed his final online credits and passed his exams with honors. To celebrate, Felix and Fred threw a small raucous graduation party at the Double F, surrounded by his supportive, diverse friends and neighbors. Rex, flushed with pride and laughter, felt the power of his chosen community fully embrace him. He had earned this celebration, the applause washing over him like a warm wave. A few weeks later, Rex started working part-time at the local town's hardware store, saving money for community college classes in the fall. And that's where he met Greg. Greg was tall, witty, and had a quick, genuine smile that made Rex forget all about the trauma, replacing it with something light and anticipatory. Greg was majoring in agricultural business at the community college and was completely, comfortably himself, never once questioning Rex's sudden arrival in town or his history. They connected instantly over shared interests, literature, the ridiculous country music played on the store radio, and dreams of life beyond the county line. Their first dates were tentative for Rex, full of the residual anxiety that comes from years of guarded secrecy. The first time Greg placed a casual hand on Rex's arm over coffee, Rex nearly jumped, a reflexive flinch that was a painful legacy of his past. Greg simply pulled his hand back, looked Rex in the eye, and asked gently, with zero judgment, "Too fast? We can slow down." Rex realized Greg saw the fear, not the fault, and the anxiety instantly dissolved. Their first kiss, finally happening after a long walk through the town's small, sun-dappled park, wasn't passionate, but profoundly gentle, a moment of quiet, affirmed safety. Greg's sheer normalcy and patience was Rex's greatest antidote to the past. He was the perfect example of the future Felix and Fred had promised him. The final evening of Rex's first summer, he stood on the porch of the Double F, adjusting the collar of his new jacket. He was heading out to meet Greg to see a movie, a regular, ordinary occurrence. He was 18, enrolled in college, employed, and tentatively, wonderfully, in love. Felix and Fred were sitting on the porch swing, watching him with quiet contentment. "Look at that kid," Fred murmured to Felix, his hand resting comfortably on his knee. "From a broken thing on the side of the road to that. He looks like he owns the whole county, and he certainly owns that new jacket." Felix smiled, his gaze full of pride and warmth. "Yeah, he was never broken, honey, just waiting to find his range. Good things come from burnt turkeys, I guess, the very best kind of accidents." Rex grinned, waving goodbye, then walked down the driveway toward his future. He didn't need saving anymore. He had been found, healed, and given a chance to shine, an unbroken star in the vast, open sky of his own future.
Rex started community college that September, majoring in English and minoring in the business courses Fred insisted were necessary for survival. Greg, already a sophomore, became his anchor, navigating him through registration and library study sessions. For the first time, Rex was not just learning, but thriving in a world that didn't demand he hide. He moved out of the bunkhouse and into a small, affordable apartment near campus, but the Double F remained his primary home base. Every Sunday, he and Greg drove out to the ranch for dinner, a ritual as sacred as the changing of the seasons. One brutal winter night, Rex's old pickup, a fixer-upper Fred had insisted on helping him buy, broke down spectacularly on the way back to the apartment, wheezing to a stop in a snow flurry. Rex called Fred, his anxiety spiking, the old panic that he was a burden resurfacing, the fear that this would be the thing that strained the unconditional love. "Don't worry about it, kid," Fred's gruff voice came through the line, completely devoid of frustration. "Tell Greg to put a blanket over the engine. I'll be there in 30 minutes with a flatbed. You two just stay warm and don't touch anything." 30 minutes later, under the glow of the flashing hazard lights, Fred didn't lecture, he simply worked with quiet, efficient determination. Greg watched, impressed, holding the flashlight steady, admiring the depth of the care being shown. Fred pulled Rex aside, not to scold, but to quietly hand him a spare set of keys. "Take the SUV for the week. You're our kid, Rex. You call us when you need us, not when you think you're allowed. That's what family does. We show up." The simplicity of the moment, the sheer, effortless act of giving, was more potent than any tearful reconciliation could ever be. Greg, witnessing this, understood the depth of the commitment Rex had found. The air on the Double F porch was thick with the scent of pine and late summer dust. The setting sun cast long, golden shadows across the rangeland. Felix and Fred, now considerably older, their smiles deeper and more wrinkled, sat on the swing. They weren't waiting for a turkey. They were waiting for their boys. Rex and Greg pulled up in a well-maintained, sensible sedan, the polar opposite of the truck Rex arrived in 10 years ago. Rex was now a beloved high school English teacher in the next county, often integrating his love of story and the theme of chosen identity into his lessons. Greg managed a regional agricultural distribution center, bridging his college degree with the practical reality of the land. They lived together in a small house with a thriving garden and a well-stocked bookshelf, their life a tapestry of mutual support and quiet domestic bliss. They had come to the Double F, as they always did, for their Sunday dinner. Rex hopped out of the car and walked straight over, his movement confident and fluid. He leaned down to hug Felix first, burying his face in the soft cotton of his shirt, then Fred. "Hey, Dads, dinner smells incredible." The use of dads was casual, earned over years of holidays, shared crises, help, and unconditional love. Fred just grunted happily, pulling Rex close, checking him over with the familiar quick glance. Greg was next. "Fred, Felix, that pasture fence you asked me about, I brought the quote from the lumber yard. We can start the repair next Saturday. I'll bring the post hole digger." Fred stood up, clapping Greg on the shoulder. "Good man. Come on, you two, let's eat. Felix actually let me handle the grill tonight, so let's hope for the best." As they all walked inside, Rex paused at the threshold, looking back at the long driveway that had once seemed like the end of the world, and now was clearly the entrance to his life. He felt the weight of Greg's hand in his, the steady presence of the two men walking beside him, and the easy warmth of the house ahead. He had lost his first family on a holiday dedicated to gratitude, but that same holiday had delivered him to the people who showed him what real, unconditional love was. He was 18 once, alone on the roadside, utterly dependent. Now he was 28, home for Sunday dinner, fully and gloriously unbroken, ready to tackle any fence line, any lesson plan, and any future alongside the family he built.